All right, good afternoon. A couple of programming notes for you. In a short while, I will be joined by our guests from the UN Mine Action Service. That will be Kazumi Ogawa, the director of the UN Mine Action Service. She will be joined by two demining experts, one in person, that's Paul Heslop, who you may know, who is working as special advisor for our resident coordinator in Ukraine. And the other one will be Nick Pond, who is the chief of the Mine Action Service at the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. He'll be joining us virtually from Kabul. This is to brief on the International Day of Mine Awareness and Assistance, which is being observed on April 4th. I urge you to stay because it is interesting. Tomorrow at 12:45, we will have Ambassador Jamal Farish, Jamal Farish Al-Rawai, the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Bahrain, who will be here in his capacity as president of the Security Council for the month of April. And I wanted to flag that this afternoon, the General Assembly will meet to consider a resolution that will move the UN80 initiative forward. The resolution focuses on Workstream II, which is the mandate life cycle, and it's important to note that this process has been led by member states through a working group co-chaired by the permanent representatives of Jamaica and New Zealand. In his remarks this afternoon, the Secretary General is expected to express his gratitude to the working group and will remind us that the UN80 initiative included a recognition of the central role of the work of member states in examining how mandates are created, implemented, and reviewed. This was essential, he will add, not only to ease the burden on member states who face an overwhelming volume of reports and meetings, not to mention journalists, but also to help the Secretariat avoid duplication, fragmentation, and inefficiency. In that spirit, the resolution presented today reflects a shared understanding of the full mandate life cycle and a shared commitment to strengthen each step of it. Earlier this morning, the Secretary General was delighted to welcome to his office New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani. The Secretary General in the meeting thanked Mayor Mamdani for the outstanding relationship and support received from our host city. Noting the critical role that cities plays in today's world, the Secretary General discussed with the mayor how to deepen the cooperation with the City of New York. The Secretary General looks forward to continuing dialogue between the UN and New York City. Also, a number of you had been asking me about our friend Jean Arnaud, who, as you know, is the Secretary General's personal envoy on the Middle East conflict and its consequences. Jean is currently in New York, where he's been holding extensive briefings and consultations internally and with member states on ways the United Nations can help in de-escalating the conflict and paving the way for a peaceful way forward through dialogue and negotiations. Wanted to flag, speaking of that conflict, wanted to flag some interesting data just released by the UN Development Program that suggests the military escalation in the Middle East may cost economies in the region from 3.7% to 6% of their collective gross domestic product. This represents a staggering loss of $120 to $194 billion and exceeds the cumulative regional GDP growth achieved in 2025. This is coupled with an estimated rise in employment of up to 4 percentage points, or 3.6 million lost jobs, which is more than the total jobs created in the region last year. These reversals will push up to 4 million people into poverty, according to UNDP's analysis. In a separate report, the development agency says a significant proportion of the Iranian population could be pushed into poverty as daily life and local economic activities are disrupted. These shocks threaten to reverse Iran's socioeconomic and poverty reduction gains. According to the analysis, Iran's Human Development Index is estimated to lose about 0.5 percentage point, which is equivalent to 1.5 years lost of human development progress. More information online on the UNDP website, which I encourage you to look at. Amid the wider regional escalation, the situation in Lebanon continues to rapidly deteriorate. Our colleagues on the ground report intensified exchanges of fire across the blue line between Hezbollah and Israel, strikes across Lebanon, and deeper Israeli troop deployment. This escalation is taking a heavy toll on civilians and civilian infrastructure, particularly in Lebanon. In northern Israel, deaths, destruction, and displacement, widespread fear have returned. It is also seriously endangering the safety and security of our own UN peacekeepers. As you know, 3 UNIFIL peacekeepers, all from Indonesia, have been killed over the past 2 days and several others injured. The mission is conducting investigations to determine the circumstances of these incidents. Preliminary findings regarding the incident in Bani Hayyan, which took place on March 30th, which is yesterday, in which 2 peacekeepers were killed, indicate that a roadside explosive struck the convoy of our Indonesian colleagues. We reiterate our strong condemnation of that incident that led to the killing of the peacekeepers, and in a statement issued this morning, the Secretary General expressed his deepest condolences to the families, friends, and colleagues of the peacekeepers who lost their lives, as well as to the government and people of Indonesia. He also, of course, wishes a quick and recovery and full recovery to the ones who were injured. Our 3 peacekeeping colleagues who were killed in service of peace in South Lebanon over the last few days are Corporal Farizal Rambe, 28 years old, who died on Sunday, and Major Zulmi Aditya Iskandar, 33 years old, and First Sergeant Mohammed Nur Ikhwan, who is 26, both lost their lives yesterday. The Secretary General strongly urges all to uphold their obligations under international law to ensure the safety and the security of UN personnel and our premises. These messages were reiterated during this morning's Security Council briefing on Lebanon. The head of our peacekeeping department, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, said UNIFIL continues to face extreme challenges amid continuing intensified hostilities. Its efforts to support the parties in fully implementing Security Council Resolution 1701 remains critical. He stressed that this exceptionally dangerous period, the Council's strong and unified backing for UNIFIL and its peacekeepers is absolutely indispensable. Also briefing the Council was Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific, Khaled Kyare. He said the UN continues to call on all sides to avail themselves of the diplomatic channels, cease hostilities, and recommit to the full implementation of Security Council 1701. We have been exercising our good offices at all levels on this issue. Meanwhile, Tom Fletcher, the head of the Humanitarian Department, who briefed the Council from Lebanon, warned that the current escalation is compounding a situation that was already critical. Since he last briefed the Council on 11 March, he said the humanitarian consequences of this latest regional escalation have grown much more acute across the whole country. The urgency of the moment was at the forefront of his meetings today in Beirut with the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, and the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Nawaf Salam. He also visited a collective shelter and met with Lebanese and Syrian families who spoke of their deep uncertainty. Mr. Fletcher will continue his visit tomorrow, where he will meet the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament, Nabi Berri. More than 1.1 million human beings are now registered as being displaced within Lebanon. Humanitarian partners, in close coordination with the government, continue to scale up assistance to families. As of yesterday, the World Food Program and its partners provided over 2.8 million meals. Humanitarian access is becoming increasingly constrained. Damage to key roads in the Bekaa Valley, combined with the destruction of bridges over the Litani River in recent days, has left parts of southern Lebanon nearly cut off from the rest of the country. As access routes are severed, and the so-called buffer zone expands, people who remain in these areas face growing isolation with very limited ability to reach safety or just basic essential services. We reiterate that international humanitarian is clear. Civilians, wherever they are, must be protected at all times and must never be targeted. This includes allowing them to move away from the dangers of hostilities to safer locations. Essential infrastructure and the basic services, healthcare, water, electricity, on which civilians depend must also be spared. Also want to say that the Secretary General was shocked at the report of an Iranian strike on a Kuwaiti oil tanker in the UAE. Such attacks could have devastating ecological impacts. I want to give you a bit more details about the leadership of UNRWA, which I mentioned yesterday, and that I want to flag that in anticipation of Philippe Lazzarini's end of term on June 30th, 2026, Secretary General has designated Christian Saunders, who is also the special coordinator on improving UN response to sexual exploitation abuse, as officer in charge of UNRWA from today until June 30th, 2026. From then on, he will be the acting Commissioner General of UNRWA starting July 1st. The Secretary General extends his utmost gratitude to Mr. Lazzarini for his tireless commitment and outstanding dedication to UNRWA and to the well-being of Palestine refugees, reiterating his profound support and appreciation to UNRWA staff for the crucial work performed in the areas of health, education, humanitarian assistance under extremely difficult circumstances. The Secretary General reiterates that it is critical that member states and other partners remain committed to UNRWA and the services it provides in a very volatile region. Turning to that region, and more specifically Gaza, our colleagues at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs say that we and our partners facilitated the return of 11 toddlers through the Rafah crossing. These children were reunited with their families after having been medically evacuated from Al-Shifa Hospital as infants back in November of 2023. Some of them are still, some were evacuated while still in incubators. Also yesterday, the World Health Organization and its partners supported the medical evacuation of 19 patients requiring treatment not available in Gaza. OCHA stresses the movement of people in and out of Gaza must take place with safety, with dignity, and in full accordance with international humanitarian law. Meanwhile, more people are suffering from skin diseases such as scabies, while rodents are infesting tents in search of food in many parts of Gaza. Our partners leading on sanitation are scaling up the distribution of hygiene kits in hotspot locations, but chemicals and pest control material are urgently needed. We continue to call for the lifting of restrictions on items that will help address the needs of the vulnerable communities. The UN Office for Project Services also tells us that the 2720 mechanism facilitated the delivery of some 400 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza via the Cyprus Maritime Corridor. The shipment includes urgently needed mattresses, incubators for pediatric wards in Gaza, and medical facilities. Turning to Yemen, our mission to support the Hudaydah Agreement, also known as UNMA, will cease operations today in accordance with Security Council Resolution 2813. As of today, the mission has completed the transfer of its tasks to the Office of the Special Envoy for Yemen. These include continued engagement with the Redeployment Coordination Committee and support for communications among the parties on the Hudaydah-related stability issues, among other tasks. The mission and the Office of the Special Envoy reaffirm our commitment to continuing to support the implementation of the Hudaydah Agreement and stress the importance of sustained communication and cooperation in support of stability of Hudaydah and Yemen. And in Syria, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that heavy rains across northern and eastern Syria since the middle of March have triggered widespread flooding, impacting communities and displacement sites across Aleppo, Idlib, Raqqa, Hasakeh, and Deir ez-Zor. More than 19,000 people have been affected in Aleppo and Idlib alone, with over 3,400 shelters damaged and hundreds just destroyed. In Hasakeh Governorate, at least 6,000 people have been displaced after homes and camps were flooded. Our humanitarian partners, together with local authorities, are providing tents, blankets, and other emergency support. Health teams are also helping displaced families in Hasakeh city and districts of Kamishli and Al-Malikieh, where water contamination and exposure to cold remains a serious concern. Access remains severely constrained, and flooded roads and damaged bridges, particularly in Deir ez-Zor, continue to hamper the delivery of aid. Authorities and our partners are working to reopen key routes, but we need more resources urgently to scale up our work to provide shelter, water, and protection support and help communities facing growing losses to their livelihoods. UNHCR says escalating hostilities since late February have triggered a surge in people crossing from Lebanon into Syria. Syrian authorities said more than 200,000 people, that includes more than 170,000 Syrians, have crossed into Syria through the 3 official border points. And from Sudan, I can tell you that we welcome today's announcement. The Adric border crossing from Chad will remain available to us through the end of June for humanitarian supplies and staff moving into Sudan. As we have said, Adre is a lifeline for millions of people in Darfur as well as parts of Kordofan. Since 2024, 118,000 metric tons of vital aid through more than 3 million people have passed through this crossing point. This is especially critical as our humanitarian colleagues warn that the worsening violence and displacement are pushing humanitarian needs to new levels. In Blue Nile State, for example, a conflict is triggering a new wave of displacement. Local sources indicate that at least 4,000 people have fled into Ethiopia, while others have been displaced within Blue Nile. We and our partners are scaling up our response, with the Sudanese Red Crescent providing hot meals to newly arrived families. In Darfur, a new report by Doctors Without Borders highlights the alarming level of sexual violence against women and girls, both in conflict areas and in displacement sites. The findings point to widespread abuse, underscoring the urgent need to ensure accountability and increase medical and psychosocial support for those who need it. In North Kordofan State, measles cases are rising in displacement site in El Obeid, with hundreds of suspected cases reported in recent weeks. We and our partners are providing water, health, nutrition services with vaccination campaigns planned for April. However, we are stymied by funding shortfalls, reduced water availability, and new arrivals of displaced people, and delays in approving new health services. Currently, the 2026 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan, which calls for $2.9 billion to reach more than 20 million people across Sudan, is just 16% funded, with $461 million received so far. We call on all donors to step up their assistance so that life-saving aid can reach the millions of people who depend on it. Bear with me, just two more notes. Venezuela, our colleagues at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that water emergency in the northern state of Sucre has entered its third week. An earthquake late last month triggered a landslide that blocked a major tunnel, leaving nearly 140,000 families without clean water. As repair efforts continue, our humanitarian partners, together with the authorities, are providing people with water purification tablets and oral rehydration salts. Meanwhile, the Pan American Health Organization says that 500,000 new vaccines arrived in Venezuela this week to sustain routine immunization and prevent breakdown of essential services. Our humanitarian colleagues note the past 4 months, more than 2 million doses of vaccines for measles, rubella, mumps, and polio have been delivered. More shots for yellow fever and rabies will arrive in the coming months. Funding, as you can imagine, remains a major challenge. This year, the Humanitarian Response Plan has received only 8%, or just about $50 million of the $632 million it needs. We got a quiz, an architectural quiz today. This country's Palace of Parliament is the second largest administrative building in the world, after the Pentagon. Sorry, who said Romania? Give that man a gold medal. Chris, I think Al Jazeera has won more quizzes, thanks to you, than any other network, any other news organization, as they say. Yes, we thank our friends in Bucharest for their full payments to the regular budget. We now have 97. For your information, Romania gave us a check for $11 million, $398,593. Thank you. I don't know how to say thank you in Romanian, but I say thank you. Edie, unless Chris has a question, he yields. Go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon, said today that Hezbollah was responsible for the killing of the 3 UN peacekeepers of UNIFIL. What is the Secretary General's reaction to that?
Our investigation is still ongoing. 2, as you know, were killed due to a roadside bomb, most likely an IED. And the first incident was an explosive that landed in the position that the Indonesians were holding. As soon as we can share the findings, we will do so. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. The Israeli Knesset passed a legislation allowing PAW, Palestinian prisoners, to be sentenced to death. There was an outcry around the world about this decision. I haven't heard if there is a statement from the UN.
Yes, with all due respect, yesterday I addressed this, and I will repeat it, is that the UN's position is very clear. The Secretary General's position is very clear. We stand against the death penalty in all its aspects, wherever. The discriminatory nature of this particular law makes it particularly cruel and discriminatory, and we ask that the Israeli government rescind it and not implement it.
My second question, at least two ministers, Israeli ministers, said they're planning to go deep in Lebanon, all the way to Litani, destroy every single house in the area and keep it as long as they decide it's safe. I don't know, probably a century after that, maybe. So what is your reaction?
I think you heard the Secretary General himself that Lebanon cannot become another Gaza, and we've heard a senior minister allude to the quote-unquote Gaza model. And these messages have been passed on. Lebanon's territorial integrity needs to be respected. Lebanon's sovereignty needs to be respected. And the Lebanese government's authority as the sole holder of the right to arms within its territory also needs to be respected.
Last question. Thank you. Nardine Kiswani is a Palestinian American activist in New York City. There was a plot against her life was unveiled last Thursday. I'm sure probably you heard of it, by a Jewish extremist of JDL, Jewish Defense League. And Mr. Mamdani issued a strong statement condemning that. Is that issue came up in the conversation?
That particular issue? No, it did not come up.
But what is your position?
Well, our position is, first of all, we're thankful that the authorities here were able to stop the plot before it came to fruition. And of course, we stand very much against violence and targeted assassinations. Madame.
Thank you, Steph. Also, execution in Iran. Two other protesters were hanged by the Iranian government yesterday or today, New York Times, and the special rapporteur in Geneva actually wrote about it as well. And other people, like 6 other people, were also executed in Iran since the war started. So while the war is happening and also these executions, anything you want to share with us? And if the Secretary General talked to the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, did he raise this issue with him or not? Thank you.
I have nothing more to share on the conversations that I already have, but I can tell you, in this instant, again, we are against the death penalty in all its forms, and we condemn the continued use of the death penalty. Please.
Thank you, Stéphane. The Human Rights Watch just shared a report. I'm quoting: Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is conducting a campaign to recruit children as young as 12 to volunteer to become homeland defending soldiers. And can I have a comment? What's
Sure.
the
I read the report, which is extremely concerning to say the least, and I hope it will be addressed by the authorities. Dulcie and then Namo.
Thanks. This is about Mamdani's visit. The Secretary General gave him 2 books, apparently.
Yeah, he did.
And can you tell us the titles?
Sure. One is a very well-known book. It's called The Charter of the United Nations.
The charter?
The Charter, yes.
Is that a book?
But it was a big. Well, it was a big version of the Charter. It's a book, a big bound book with the Charter in all 6 official languages. It's definitely not a pocket version of the Charter. And he also gave him a recent book on the artwork that hangs on the walls in this building.
But is there going to be a follow-up meeting? I mean, you said that they agreed to work together more closely.
Yeah, I mean, the discussions will continue between the teams on how we can best work together to advance a number of issues. I mean, the Secretary General has always been very clear about the role that cities play in advancing the issues that we care about, whether it's inequality, whether it's housing, whether it's climate change. And the Secretary General has been working closely with the C24 on that, and especially on climate. And he looks forward to having the city and the UN work on those issues, because when we talk about the global stage is often very well illustrated at the local stage. Namo.
Thank you, Stéphane. Two questions. The first one on the statement that the Secretary General put out over the weekend. You called for an investigation into the attack on the residence of Iraqi Kurdistan's president. Have you talked to Iraqi officials about this, or what has been
I
the
think those
response?
contacts were had at probably at the local level with our country team.
Okay, and yesterday the U.S. Representative Jeff Bartos said at the UN General Assembly that UN staff fly business class more than most national governments. Is that true?
I don't know if that's true. I think it would be interesting to see that data. The travel rules, as approved by the General Assembly, are very clear. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, let me get our guests. We'll be right there.